That if you live within 1 mile of a golf course, you have a 126% increased risk of developing Parkinson's disease. I know progesterone for men is kind of a foreign concept to a lot of you guys. It's sort of the forgotten hormone for men. There's a lot of research going on now with oxytocin as a potential treatment for osteoporosis. Humanin benefits mitochondrial function. It's very neuroprotective. What plasmalogens are, they build...
Welcome to our Q&A highlights. Q&A sessions are recorded every month, and our enhanced members get an exclusive opportunity to ask questions from one of cellular medicine's brightest minds, Dr. Elizabeth Yurth. Get a chance to ask your questions by becoming our enhanced member at bli.academy/memberships. You also get access to our content library full of tips, articles, videos, lectures, previous live Q&A sessions, and more.
Jennifer, she asked, what are my thoughts on how to reduce the risk of Parkinson's and other diseases that are associated with high environmental toxic exposure if you live on or near a golf course? Great question, Jennifer. And I was really thrilled to have the opportunity to talk about this because this is kind of scary. This study just came out actually in May. It's published in JAMA that found that if you live within 1 mile of a golf course, you have a 126% increased risk of developing Parkinson's disease compared to individuals who lived more than 6 miles away from the golf course. That's pretty terrifying, right? So the greatest risk was in people 1 to 3 miles within the golf course, and risk decreased with distance. Most concerning, 90% of the people living within 3 miles had a groundwater service. So they have groundwater that actually is contaminated. So most of their water that they're getting is contaminated with the pesticides from the golf course. So it's not just the air that you're breathing, because they spray a lot of pesticides on golf courses, guys. They've got to keep that nice and green, have no weeds, so there's tons of pesticides being used on it. But that gets into the groundwater, so now the water sources also get contaminated. So what do you have to do? Well, move away from the golf course is one option, but some of you love living on your golf courses. So carbon water filter or reverse osmosis systems, reverse osmosis by far the best, definitely to remove the pesticides from your drinking water. Okay. That's probably the most important defense that you have. And then you could check, if you go to Environmental Working Group, we've talked about this, EWG, you can put in your zip code and you can see how many toxins are in there. And then you have to basically, in terms of the air quality, this is a tougher one, right? But definitely know when they spray pesticides. So ask your golf course what days and times they spray the pesticides, and try not to be home during that time, or in your house with a good ventilation system and a good, something like the molecule air filtration. But basically know those days and times, and don't be hanging around running on your streets or running on the golf course at those times. Okay, so that's going to protect somewhat against the airborne exposure, which is the second root of you getting exposed to these pesticides. Also, typically spring through fall are kind of peak spraying seasons. So you really want to have great air purification systems that upregulate during those times. Those of you guys who live near a golf course need to have really good air filtration systems. I know progesterone for men is kind of a foreign concept to a lot of you guys. It's sort of the forgotten hormone for men, right? Testosterone gets all the play. Estrogen gets a little attention, especially since like Brian Johnson, who's now taking estrogen. So estrogen gets a little bit of attention for cardiac and brain health, and progesterone just gets forgotten. But progesterone is so amazing for men. Remember, it is essential for men too. All 3 hormones are essential for both sexes. So progesterone is naturally protective against prostate enlargement and probably prostate cancer. That's because it counteracts some of the effects of DHT and estrogens, both of which can promote prostate growth. So some of the older studies, actually, back in the old days, they used to use progesterone around the prostate to sort of inhibit prostate growth and reduce PSA levels. So basically, it's a great way of helping with prostate enlargement. But think about other benefits of progesterone. It's really neuroprotective. It promotes myelin repair, reduces neuroinflammation. It's very protective against neurodegenerative diseases. Men with higher progesterone levels had better sleep, they were less anxious, and they had better cognitive function. And most men, if you measure progesterone levels, which we do, have low levels. It's particularly interesting for anybody who's undergone a concussion or traumatic brain injury. That's a really protective thing for the brain. If you can immediately give progesterone after a traumatic brain injury, like a concussion, you can keep a lot of the bad things from happening. But it also supports the immune system. It's just a fascinating hormone. And the same benefits it has in women for bone health, for brain health, for immune health, it has in men. They just need a lot less. So I believe that progesterone goes a very long way, and it declines as we age, just like all hormones do. Oxytocin is traditionally known for its role in childbirth and lactation, right? That's kind of it's also our love hormone. When we fall in love or we smell chocolate chip cookies, we make more oxytocin. It has so many other receptors. And one of them is truly on, these oxytocin receptors is on bone. So this hormone does appear to have a very positive association with bone density. Now, I love it beyond that because we know it helps with social behavior. We know it helps with stress reduction. We use it a lot for pain management. We know it's cardiovascular protective. We know it's cognitive protective. But the OPUS study, which is one of the biggest studies ever done, so it was over 1,000 postmenopausal women, and they looked at levels of oxytocin and bone health. And what they found is that women who had highest oxytocin levels had much better bone density, especially in the hip. So those higher oxytocin levels definitely seem to be associated with high bone mineral density, especially in women when they had lower estradiol. Okay? So women with low estradiol who had higher oxytocin levels were protected. Now, I will tell you, estradiol is much more potent for bone than oxytocin. But oxytocin may still be beneficial because it has an anabolic action. It promotes these osteoblasts. Those are the cells that are making new bone by upregulating a couple of pathways, something called BMP2 and AFT4. So it basically upregulates these pathways. It also, while it's upregulating those same pathways that help with bone, it reduces fat formation. So that's another benefit of it. You can actually use it for some fat loss. Now, Tina, you don't need that, but some people do. So basically, this hormone works by stimulating the osteoblasts. It also inhibits the osteoclasts, and it regulates fat formation, which can be adverse to bone formation. So really, there's a lot of research going on now as oxytocin as a potential treatment for osteoporosis. And they did do a study that tried supplementing oxytocin for people older than 60, not on hormone replacement. And not only did bone density increase, but so did lean muscle mass. It's another little known fact about muscle and oxytocin. And I gave a big talk on oxytocin and muscle building a while ago. And it's really interesting because you can actually use oxytocin post-workout and enhance muscle building. So it does appear to be beneficial in a whole lot of ways. So Prodrome Glia, so these are both plasmalogens. They just differ. Prodrome Glia is an omega-9 plasmalogen. What plasmalogens are the building blocks for neural tissue. So the Prodrome Glia, the omega-9, is a building block for glial cells. Okay? So glial cells are what surround and support and protect our neurons. And these get significantly, the plasmalogens in these around these tissues get significantly depleted with inflammation. So as we age or we're sick or we've had viruses, they get very depleted. And that leads to white matter defects in the brain. And then Prodrome Neuro is an omega-3 DHA plasmalogen. Okay, so it's an omega-3, whereas Glia is omega-9. And again, these are precursors. You can't give plasmalogens. They won't get into the brain. So you give these what are called acyl acyl glycerols that are converted. They can cross the blood-brain barrier and convert into plasmalogens in the brain and start getting new gray and white matter, growing new and gray white matter. Yes, we see it on MRI scans, growing new gray and white matter with Prodrome Glia and Prodrome Neuro. All right. The plasmalogens are such a key building block for the brain tissue and other neurons as well. They're prominent in our eye, they're prominent in our heart, so other tissues as well, but the brain importantly. So these are precursors that are going to hopefully prevent demyelination, neurodegeneration, and again, the studies are supporting this. Remember, these mitochondrial peptides are so beneficial to longevity and to overall health. Humanin benefits mitochondrial function. It's very neuroprotective, has potential longevity benefits, especially for cognitive enhancement. SS31, more potent, directly targets the inner mitochondrial membrane. So the cardiolipin in the inner mitochondrial membrane is what gives us those nice folds. And that's why we have this big surface area, right? All these nice folds, so we can make a lot of ATP. So there's these complexes, right, that sit on that inner membrane. And these electrons are passed across these complexes, and then ATP spit out. So if I've got more surface area, I can make more ATP. But as we age, or there's been damage from something, then those inner membranes look like this. So my surface area is not very good, and I can't make much ATP anymore. So SS31 becomes critical to reform the mitochondria and make it an energy producer again. So I do recommend cycling these. Either sometimes we'll do them 5 days on, 2 days off, or 3 weeks on, 1 week off, or 6 weeks on, 6 weeks off. It's all over the board how we do and what we're treating. The thing that has the most evidence in basal cell carcinomas is nicotinamide. And even though, you guys have heard me preach against the NAD precursors, nicotinamide in my basal cell carcinomas is where I will definitely make an exception, because it is really compelling evidence that addresses the DNA repair mechanisms that are really, really helpful in any of the basal cell or melanoma cancers. So I would say nicotinamide is a no-brainer, proven, safe, cheap, taking 500 milligrams twice a day orally. And then I would use your 1-MNA because you want to block that NMT, which is probably upregulating somebody like you who's got cancer propensity. So we would upregulate the 1-MNA or downregulate the NMT with 1-MNA. So you would take your nicotinamide, get all its benefits, but we'd block it from going down into any of these bad metabolites or disrupting your methylation, which we definitely don't want to do. So I would definitely go with that and topical nicotinamide, right? Those of you guys who have used it for wrinkles know it's actually also very potent, immunoprotective against UVs. So I love topical. Tony asks about a recent mouse study out of Copenhagen that showed that NAD depletion did not lead to any accelerated aging. And in fact, there was no disease process in these mice associated with that dropping NAD levels. And he says, how has that affected my view of the role of NAD in aging? So personally, I loved this study because it's what I keep preaching. It's why I'm not happy with this rampant replacement of NAD that everybody is hopping on the bandwagon of, because we really don't have a whole lot of evidence that this decline in NAD is a health problem. The decline in NAD is symptomatic of another problem. The decline in NAD means we are draining the NAD too fast. Our body can't keep up with the production because we're draining it too fast. And the reason we're draining it too fast is because upregulation of certain enzymes that get upregulated with disease processes, including the enzyme NNMT. So this enzyme, when it's upregulated, steals the NAD and it disrupts things because it creates some bad metabolites like 4-pyridone, and because it disrupts methylation. So I'm looking at the low NAD level and thinking that's the problem, when really the problem is the high level of the NNMT enzyme draining it, right? So if I just had low NAD levels in like mouse, they just were mouse that were bred for the low NAD. They didn't have this other pathology, so they didn't see any disease. But in us, we do see disease associated with low NAD levels, but it's likely not the low NAD. It's the upregulation of the enzymes that are depleting it and the end product of that.